Hello and welcome back to the Gold Advantage. Covering the LEC, we took a little hiatus last week, which is probably for the better because I don't think it was that exciting. None of the bets were that great. But we are back for this second round.
I mean, honestly, it's freaking August in Europe. People don't even work, so the fact that we're here is fantastic.
It is fantastic. It's something special.
I think the only people working is the LEC.
I think the thing that I wanted to highlight last week, the gap between the end of the summer split and this was a little bit long.
So weird.
And so
Very long.
some of the momentum around the LEC, which had a good final split, good storylines, has dissipated a little bit.
Completely. How do you feel about these breaks? Like, to me, it's like basically a whole new season at this point. Like, you're basically like, you took a break. It was multiple weeks. The LCS had their entire summer playoffs in between then and now, and so to me, it is like one of these things where it's like, how do you kind of get from a team chemistry perspective, from a flow perspective?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The momentum is lost. Yeah. So the excitement as a fan, you're following it. You're seeing the storylines. You're excited to see Fnatic play. You're excited by the results that Excel achieved. And then there's suddenly nothing. That's quite difficult. And I think actually as a player, I think that's quite difficult. And I think we saw that with Excel Mad Lions series. Now, on the flip side, it gives Mad Lions an opportunity to look back, fix what's going wrong, and come out looking decent. For Excel, some of the momentum has been lost. There is obviously a new patch that they're playing on. Enough about that. People don't want to hear about the breakdown. The first match of the weekend is going to be BDS against SK. I think obviously that means we need to talk about G2 BDS.
Well, that's what I was going to say. G2 BDS. It's hard to talk about this in a way that is not just always G2's good.
They are.
This is a BDS team that played well in the spring.
Not so well in summer.
Not so well in summer. And so this is like, to me, just a bit of a continuation of that. Like the fact that they got one game, great.
But it was also one game where they were given through picks and bans. Adam got his Darius. Nuke managed to get Tristana. And, he went 5-2-5. Adam went 6-2-1. So these were like two power picks.
100%.
They just got handed the perfect draft. They pulled it off.
Totally.
That's good.
Good. When you have a perfect draft, they are a good team still.
But I also feel like G2 likes to limit us. They do weird drafts. They like to put themselves in a disadvantage. They like to play an imperfect draft to see how does the other team deal with it. How do we adapt to not having the perfect draft? And I think this is actually...
It's so funny to say that. Yeah. They're just like kind of playing with their food. And you have to be careful with that, right? We saw this in Cloud9 versus NRG. You have to be careful when you're the dominant team and then you start a bit playing with your food and trying new things out. I
strongly disagree with that. I really disagree with that analogy. I think that's the analogy that's easy to make.
I just did.
It's like Cloud9 and NRG. But I would actually say Cloud9 never does this. Cloud9 basically never drafts weirdly. They're always pretty traditional in their drafts and pretty meta reliant. They're not whipping out a random, then they're not suddenly giving the other team massively overpowered picks and then picking, hey, let's try out Kled or let's try Evelyn out in jungle. You don't see them doing those weird picks. And I would also say that, and this was something actually I think I Will Dominate brought up, and it was a very valid point, is that they win, and they win games they shouldn't win, and then they learn nothing from those wins. Whereas I feel like G2 does these weird picks, or they purposefully will go, okay, we can always win from an early game comp, so let's play a late game comp. And they'll put themselves in situations where they could draft differently and just win every game, but they'll limit test. That's what I mean. They're trying to find where the weaknesses are so that they can get better. Whereas Cloud9 is it's almost like a finger difference. They're just better, and so they win that way. But then when they go up against the Asian teams, they make a mistake and the Asian team just punishes them. And they don't even know the mistake they're making, because if they made that mistake against the NA teams, no one can punish them. And so they think like, we're still playing well. And I think that's a big mistake.
G2's prepping for Worlds.
Yes.
Right? They're not just playing to win. They're not playing for first. They're not playing for second. They're playing for Worlds. And I think that there are a few other teams between North America or Europe that have that mentality or that skill set and that experience, right? And that both comes from the coaching, that comes from the players, like that comes from a confidence. Not to belabor the point, like this is a BDS team again that like I don't think G2 is afraid of. Like I think in the spring G2 was afraid of that BDS team, right? And that BDS team was good. Where we are today, I think it's a team that G2 felt confident in, had scouted out, wasn't concerned about them, and, rightfully so, kind of put the pedal to the metal.
I think that is a situation. This makes it very interesting going into the SK BDS series.
This is a SK team that was performing in the summer. Look, no one here is a bigger fan of BDS. Mm-hmm. We know that here. Yep. I'm a BDS lover. This is an SK team that's going to beat BDS.
I think they might. I really do, because
they will.
They finished one game behind them in the regular season. Yep. Then when you're looking at group stage, they both finished in third place with a 1-2. I would actually say that SK had the harder group. You had XL, Fnatic, and Mad Lions. Now, Mad Lions bombed out there, but I would rather have Koi and Heretics in my group than Fnatic, XL, and Mad.
Correct.
When I'm looking at this BDS team, I haven't really been inspired for all of summer. At the end, we saw a little bit of a glimmer, but then this loss to G2 just kind of confirmed it for me. Whereas I felt that SK was... No, I'm not sure I'm confident enough to say SK is going to win, but I'm confident enough to say that SK can win, and that leads me to start looking at where the value is on the bets.
Yeah, if you look back across the last couple summer matches, the last team that BDS beat was Heretics. Yeah. This is a Heretics team that we were not overly impressed with. They then go in, get absolutely smoked by G2, to what we were talking about with G2 not being nervous, and they come back and then get smoked by Heretics again.
Yeah.
Or get smoked by Heretics a second time. Whereas this SK team beats Fnatic. They lose to XL, but this is an XL team that was really on the upslope, and we'll talk about XL. And then they lose to Fnatic. I think it's hard to beat the same team twice. I'm glad to see BDS playing some different teams. I'm sure BDS kind of went to G2 being like, ugh, these guys again. We're going to get our ass beat by these guys again. Mm-hmm. I think it's a close game. I do think, though, that SK was just the better team at the end of last summer. SK's had a chance to scout this BDS team. They've had a couple games to watch them. They know, exactly to your point, what the perfect comp looks like for them. Yeah. They're going to know who to let through and who not to let through.
Yeah.
And this is a BDS team that I don't think has as much latitude or variability in their champion pool, right? It's just they're kind of not a one-trick pony, but they don't have the depth of champion pool that I think that an SK will in this example.
I agree. With that in mind, the bets are not that exciting from my side. So BDS has a 1.65 on the money line. SK has a 2.1. I actually like the SK 2.
I have 2.2. I have 2.2.
2.2. I like that. Looking at the individual map lines, I have a 1.75 on BDS and a 1.95 on SK. So I'm going to be watching this series closely and betting individual map lines, because I think that's where there's value. I actually think the SK plus 1.5 at 1.5 isn't bad. It's the best out of all of them. I'm not confident enough in either team to give them a minus 1.5, but the plus 1.5, I actually think this can go to 5, or SK can win, 3-1. And either way, you're kind of locking that in.
Funny you say that. That was going to be my big money move, is the minus 1.5 on SK at 3.63.
I mean, the value is absolutely there, I think, on both sides, to be fair.
I'm absolutely going to take the money line at 2.2, but I'll throw 1 unit for a minus 1.5.
Okay, I get it. I agree with it. I think I'm just going map by map. It just seems a lot safer, because we haven't seen SK in a little while, and they might come out also pretty meh. It's kind of it. That's all I really have to say. Like I said, neither of these teams inspired me. I think SK shows a little bit more consistency. Next match, XL versus Fnatic. Now, this is quite an interesting one.
Very interesting.
Obviously, XL got beaten pretty handily.
Smoke.
Game 2, XL was actually winning until a bad dive. And again, a little bit Peach again kind of inted under tower.
Yeah.
It was a bad dive. They were attacking Mad Lion's base, and then they lost that fight, and that was it. The death timers were too long, and they just had trouble closing it out. And so I'm not saying I don't think Mad Lions would have won, but I think it could have been a 3-1.
But I think my bigger point on this is Mad Lions, year after year, when it comes time to put up and you're in the playoffs, they somehow always make the moves. They always have the team chemistry. This is a team that's just I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Something's in the water. When it's the regular season, right, or whatever it might be, they'll throw games. They'll terrible team to bet on. You never know what they're going to do, but you know that they're always going to sneak into playoffs, and that they're going to do great in playoffs. It makes no sense, but it works. This is an XL team that was really performing.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they came out and got 3-0'd, and like, look, not all 3-0s are the same. To your point, I think Peach was definitely someone who, and that stuff is teachable, right? Like that, these things are, I think, things that you can really kind of like work on from the week to week.
Sure.
But man, what a fun matchup we have. I mean, of course, having Fnatic in the losers bracket, no matter who they were going to play, whether it be Mad Lions or XL, is going to be a great matchup. This is a matchup that we've seen XL already beating Fnatic.
We have
just a couple weeks ago, so there is a familiarity there. To me, this feels like a Fnatic win, though. I actually feel very strongly that you're going to see a Fnatic come, like, kind of like they have the vibe. They've seen XL play. Mm-hmm. Again, you see the mistakes, you get the scouting. I mean, Fnatic is a massive favorite, so I don't love that. But I think it's going to be a lot closer than this line insinuate.
I agree with you on that one. I thought it was closer as well, but Fnatic is so favored. I have XL 2.8. I have Fnatic 1.38. It's
so bad.
It's ridiculously favored, but at the same time, when you look back on it, Fnatic did so well. But XL is a team that got to the finals. They beat them and got them to the finals. So really, I think the 2.8 on XL is phenomenal.
Well, I have 2.87.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is so much value on even taking XL minus 1.5 at 4.4.
Wow. I mean, like, honestly, this is one of those times where these two teams are close enough that there's just no reason that those lines should be that much skewed. Yeah. Like, I don't know where that line's coming from. I love the over 4.5.
They beat Fnatic 3-1. So
correct.
I'm not calling for an XL win. I'm just saying there's a lot of value at minus 1.5 at 4.4. Yeah. And I think there's too much value there to overlook.
Agreed.
I even think there's too much value on the XL money line, the series line.
I agree.
2.87.
You have to put a dime on that. I agreed with you on one. I agreed with one of your bets.
It's not even necessarily about saying XL will win. It's not purely about that. It's also about understanding where the price is mismatched.
Correct. They're basically saying that Fnatic at a minus 1.5 is 50-50.
Exactly.
A little bit worse than 50-50. But they're basically saying they're going to 3-0, 3-1 more than they will lose or even win 3-2. That's just not true. Correct. And this is an XL team that is still good. I'm on board with your money line wager. I'm not going to go minus 1.5, but I appreciate the value. And then, honestly, I'm going to hedge it. And it's not even really a hedge, but it's a little bit of a hedge with the over 4.5. Okay. Because I just think it's going to be a close matchup. I do think it could go either way.
I don't disagree with that.
I wish that the plus 1.5 was a little bit better for me. Like, I still have XL at plus 1.5 though for 1.77.
That's pretty great.
Honestly, pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty great too. But I'm just going to be covered with the over 4.5 and the money line.
Yep.
So like, I'm just going to go with the bigger money.
I get it. I think that wraps it up. There's only these two matches. We kind of covered it.
By the way, had we done a podcast last week, we would have obviously picked G2 over BDS, but the money line would have been terrible. Exactly. It wouldn't have been worth it. And then I would have 100% picked XL over Mad Lions. And for that, so I'm glad that nobody had to follow that bad advice.
Absolutely. The only thing that I think you should do different is to like, subscribe, and check out our Discord. Link is down below.
I'm just excited for Worlds.
I am too.
I'm just like really excited for Worlds. I'm excited. In our Discord, you and Robert and a couple others have been hammering the LPL and the LCK.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of amazing data that we've been tracking and following there. So I think our community is really stepping up, and like Worlds is just gonna we're gonna have more data available and more interesting insights for Worlds than I think we've had in a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's gonna be great fun. Bye, everyone.
Toodaloo.